Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon where you live around the world. In the previous video, I had looked at the option of creating a dome structure using a 3V base, but acknowledged that there's no leg available that would be able to be used for our dome, for a 3V dome. In fact, the leg, if you use one of the faces or surfaces of the dome, would actually be angled backward. Not very structurally sound, and that forcing a leg to be created, or just plucking one out of the air, makes for quite a weird looking dome. This will certainly work. Don't get me wrong, you can do what you like. And that was the point that was playing in the back of my head all the time I've been doing these drawings, and when I kept on developing from here, which I've looked at several other options, and I've come to the conclusions it's simply not worth the effort of chasing it down. If something pops up that proves me wrong later, I'll do something about it, but until then I'm not. I had, in that leading up to making that decision, which should have been made probably long ago, I looked at some other frequency domes, the 5V, but every time you do that, there was something about it that was always a compromise, and quite often that compromise just meant that you had to fudge the structure in some way, and we're already doing that to a degree, but by using the approach that we have here, we're using a 4V with a rotated plane around which we can make a decision to use a radius or a ray or the porcupine in a particular manner. We wind up being able to achieve, as close as we're able, the end result that we're actually looking for. The fact that when we talk about the four faces or four edges that have a slightly curved look, or not, I think is a red herring. In fact, in some cases, which we'll look at in a moment, some of the domes that are created are more grid-like in their layout or in their plan view, where their hubs are, the intersection points. I think that really should have been a little bit more obvious to me some time ago, even though I'd acknowledged that existence, that there is no magic single way to draw the structure as I want it, let alone draw a dome. The methods that are shown in a lot of the much more experienced people, or more mathematically, or like Paul Robinson. That's what he's brilliant, and John Hurt at the Zip Tie Domes. They've done an absolutely fantastic job. But even having that knowledge, I still feel that for the end result of what I'm doing with the four-pointed the base, no one way is better. And in fact, I think the compromise that we've come to may be better suited to my end purpose. In the conventional system of drawing a dome, where we would use a divided triangle, one which we would run down a line, say for instance, from point to point here, and dividing that line, it doesn't suit the end purposes that I want to achieve. The reason for that is that the top part of the dome, what I always keep on referring to as the squashed pyramid, has, as a result of the triangle method, the divided lines along this angle, will always have this strut shorter than the next strut down. It's inherent in the method, the geometry of using that approach. The alternate approach, and there's obviously more than one, even the alternate approach is to have the sections of the circumference, depending, in this case 4, you have the dome created having those two struts the same length, which means not having the conventional or the more proper way of drawing the dome. And in fact, I think that method can exacerbate the distortions in the hexagon. That's probably going to be true without me having to overly concentrate on that point. Equally, as I tried to do, I made a hexagon, angled it into the plane of a proper hexagon, in the flat, and angled it and put it on the angle of this dome generated hexagon. As a result, of course, when you rotate, which I knew was going to be the case, the hexagon in different quadrants won't line up, won't touch. So you have to then start fudging the lengths of the strut to make the dome structure, which as a result you wind up with a balanced looking dome hexagon, a domed structure here, but it gets closer and closer to what we've got in many of our drawings. So it's a inbuilt feature of making a 4-pointed base dome, as we want for a pergola and a gazebo, that this point, from point here to this point, will always be larger than the point across here. And in fact, that's the case for a hexagon, period. And therefore you will get a distorted shape to each triangle. Badly worded, but it's the approach of using a hexagon requires there to be a distortion. What I had done, however, was made this strut and this strut, or rather, I'll show you again, this strut and this strut equal. And this strut and this strut, as much as you're trying to make it equal, is quite different from these lengths, because it has to, the hexagon has to be distorted for it to join up in a 3D situation rather than when it's in a 2D in a flat plane. Whew, follow that. Okay. And also, you may want to take a look at the heading that I've made for this file. A look at a 3V dome, which is a dead end for our development purpose. It's dead right. So we can put aside all those other options. Doesn't mean to say I'll stop looking on other points, but here I found a nice. I'll just get rid of that. Not that. What have I got there? Can I hide that? Yes. I found this picture, and it is obviously a nice looking dome. And one of the features I saw straight away, if I bring in a guide, was that yes, it's nice and flush. If you can follow the guide, it's flush there as we want. It's dead straight in the middle, as wouldn't be required. But when we come to these points, the 3 hubs, 1, 2, 3, they are pretty much, well, they are actually in line, making that, as I mentioned before, I look at these ones in my brain, I instantly think truss, even though they haven't got the because a truss generally has to be formed in a vertical plane to allow the timbers to work correctly. And even though we don't have the triangulation on the for base chord as of a truss in this situation, because of that, my brain just keeps on thinking of that alignment. So when we look at a dome like this in plan view, get rid of the perspective, you can see it's a grid-like structure, and the proportion would be determined by a method I have got no idea. As you can see here, the difference in the lengths of the grids as such, quite different. So this just reinforces the view that one method over another may well be no better than the other. If you can make it work with this method, a grid-like plan view, or you've got that, as I said, preferred look of a curved line that these 4 segments would create, then go for it. Unless there is a inherent structural flaw, we would only be talking about the differences between the approaches or the shapes. That one may be stronger than the other may well be true, but it doesn't mean that this version is so much weaker that you shouldn't use it. It may well be that that curved line that we keep on referencing is better for another purpose I'm not aware of. So therefore, I'm going to put it to bed and carry on in my pursuit of building a dome or creating a dome using the version that we started with, or the slight iteration where we made the strut slightly longer. Okay, so come to the conclusion, which I should have done probably weeks ago, that one method, the easiest one, is the one that you should go with, and that's the one I'm going with. So the next time we make a video, it will be more than likely around how I'm choosing to make the hubs, because I want to look at the hub method rather than having the separate triangle method at this stage, and I want to make sure that that approach is adaptable so that the plates can be bent or rebent to suit our angles, because we know that they are quite different in angle between one leg to another. So the fortunate thing is that we're not building a full dome, and the number of different hubs is quite low. So we're lucky in that department there that we just have the left and right equivalent. So we may have this hub and this hub may well be just that the hub, like a star, like the star hub that a lot of the dome builders use, is just turned around. So it's the same design with the 4 legs, but you just flip it over top to bottom, and you've got the one for this corner. So in that case, the number of hubs types are greatly reduced. Okay, rather than carry on with that and listen to my voice anymore, I'll see you again soon with the look at the hubs. Okay, bye.